Welcome to Scotiabank Dance Centre. We're located on the traditional, ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh nations. It's an honour and a privilege to be guests in their lands, and we are grateful. My name is Claire French, and I'm your host on behalf of the Dance Centre. Welcome to you, our audience, and thank you so much for joining us today. The pandemic has hit organisations everywhere very hard. The Dance Centre is no exception. Major sources of revenue, such as studio rentals and ticket sales, have dropped and are unlikely to recover in the foreseeable future. But we are still committed to supporting dance artists through our residencies like this DanceLab program and other professional programs, and to sharing dance with as many people as possible through screenings like this one. If you are able, please consider donating to help us continue to support dance. We would be truly grateful. Please enjoy this DanceLab showing entitled Cedar Woman by dance artist Tasha Faye Evans.
Hey!
Faye Evans, thank you so much. It's wonderful that we get this chance to talk to and find out more and share more about the work and background behind the work. I thought it might be nice to start with a bit of history and context around Cedar and around the significance of that for you first, and historically perhaps. So we'll start there and we'll move into the studio as we go through the questions.
Beautiful. So Hapai, which is cedar, is our tree of life in Coast Salish culture. The cedar tree offers us so many medicines, physically, spiritually, emotionally. We carve canoes to travel. We carve masks and regalia and house posts to tell our stories. We weave with cedar to create regalia and to create baskets. The cedar as a being offers us clean air, and she holds in her roots, she holds our viruses. And my elder, she always says that be careful when you chop a tree down, and especially around clear cuts, because the viruses are released. And so it's always great when you're choosing a home or when you're needing to ground and to just feel, to come home inside yourself, to go to a tree, to a cedar tree, and just sit in her lap. So there's always roots she creates for her grandchildren to come and sit in her lap. And so cedar has always been an auntie for me. And if you go back to my work, there's either a rock or a cedar tree in my body of work. But this particular piece is called Cedar Woman. And it comes from, I think it's been growing, the call has been growing inside me to create this work. But over the last few years, there's been much unrest of my community, defending what we know to be sacred. So our waters, our lands, our culture, our language, our children, our sisters, our mothers. And when I stand on the front line and I sing with my family, I can hear it's not just our voices, it's our ancestors' voices singing. You hear their voice, and for me, that's Cedar Woman. For me, she's the one that helps us rise when we fall. She lifts us because she's been here the longest, and she's the one who gives. She's constantly giving, and so Cedar Woman in particular is an ancestral being. The story that was told to me was that when the Great Flood arrived here in these Coast Salish lands and waters, many of the men took to large canoes. And to this day, there are families in the Garibaldi Mountains and here closer in Chehalis where they take care of this pathway. And so no one can go up there because at the top there is a petrified large canoe. And at the same time, there were women who took to the mountains with their children. And the story that was shared with me was that the Khals, our transformers, they knew that these women weren't going to make it with the rising floods. So they were transformed into cedar trees. And so the woman, she transformed herself so that her children could hang on to her branches at the top as the waters rose. And from that, we have Cedar Woman. The box is actually carved by Xwalacktun, who is an incredible master carver and he's created a legacy of Coast Salish carvers. He's amazing, and I raise my hands to him for his work and his heart and what he put into that box. And the box is there to hold the mask that Ocean is carving. I feel that Cedar Woman is such a powerful ancestor. She's such a powerful being that in Tasha's body, I could never hold that energy. I could never assume that my body could hold her energy. So I asked Ocean if she would carve a mask, and so I could wear that mask and the spirit could dance through the mask, and I could be those legs and be the voice for the mask. And the box is there to hold that Cedar Woman's mask. That's just one layer. Yeah. And then there's this layer, and that layer, and that layer, and that layer. So so at its basic level, it's preserving the mask, it's taking care of the mask. On another layer, it's representing, it's holding the legacy of Coast Salish women that I'm a part of, that Ocean's a part of, all the way back to Cedar Woman, and then even prior to Cedar Woman, to that seed that became the tree that Cedar Woman was transformed into. And for me, that's held in the box. That is what the box is holding, is that legacy. And I've had the privilege to be side by side with carvers for the last few years, and have been carving myself with them. And you'll get to this point where you'll be carving and you'll release this fragrance of resin, this smell that has been locked in one of those layers of the tree for hundreds of years. So this box was made out of a yellow cedar tree who was 600 years when she fell and then sat for some time. And so it's just amazing to me that all that time is right there. So when I arrive, when I arrive at that box, for me, it's like a fold in time of, it's Tasha here in this time, but it's also Tasha in 700, 800 years ago, where I come from, that legacy. Because in a tree, all those rings are still there. The heart, the seed, and then all of those years are there in the rings of the tree. And you can, and as I say, so when you're carving and you come across this resin that was caught in one of the layers, that's at year 300, what happened? What happened at year 300? And these trees are standing ones, they've witnessed so much change in these Coast Salish lands and waters. They've witnessed so much, and they're still there standing for us and cleaning our air and holding our stories. And so that moment is coming home to that, and being embraced, allowing myself to be embraced in that, and at the same time Tasha embracing that too.
I'd like to stay with Tasha for a moment for my next question. I feel in what you're saying that there's also something that happens in our movement expression, which is also about this sense of giving space for an idea to come, or for an expression to either come out or to come in order for us to understand what to do with it, in terms of whether we're improvising or whether we're expressing ourselves in dance. So in the studio, I felt that there were moments in the piece that do the same thing as that there's giving time, and obviously the scale of that time is much shortened, but it's there is time for an idea to come in or come out, and that plays quite nicely, I think, with the idea. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about there's one section where I felt like the movements, there was movement expression, and then there were also moments where I felt like you were dealing with an external force, pushing something away maybe, or like, I'm not sure if that's part of it, or if it's got this, if I'm misreading or overreading, but there was something very interesting about going from this place of contemplation, almost an expression, which felt very much between like ceremonial perhaps movement and contemporary expression, Tasha expression. And then it felt like there was a sense of the intention changed for me, and it became like an external thing of pushing something away on the outside of the body. Is that in there?
Absolutely. So I'm just going to back up a minute to talk about, because you were talking about that call and response to the work. And so one of my co-collaborators, Charlene, Aleck, was in here with me yesterday, and she was saying that as much as it's Tasha creating the work, Tasha is following spirit. And that's what Indigenous work is for me, is that we come into the room and I ask my ancestors to come and be in the room with me, and I'm answering their call, especially in this piece. So when I'm talking about answering the call, in Coast Salish art, in our form, there is a shape called the ancestor's eye. And for me, this is like for me, this is one of the biggest values of Coast Salish culture. And it continues to guide me throughout my life, because I didn't grow up within an Indigenous community. I just always knew that I was First Nations. It took me a while to know where I was from and how that story unfolds and where I'm at now on my journey. But this symbol for me is a teacher, and so it's a circle. It's a circle, and then it's the crescents on either side, and then it's a crescent and a triangle. And it's all about, you drop a stone in the water, and it creates the ripples, and that energy keeps going out into time, that trajectory. And so for me, the box and Cedar Woman is the eye, right in the eye. So we call this shape the ancestor's eye, because the ancestors are always, we're never alone. Behind you, you have your ancestors behind me, and they're watching over us. And they made choices, and they had prayers for us, and they planted seeds for us, for our generations. They created ripples for us, and we too are going to step in that line, and we too have to drop those stones and create those ripples and make those decisions for our future generations, for their health and well-being. And so when I am there at the box for the first time, and this at the top of the piece, I'm arriving at that first prayer. What was that first call that seed had that grew into a tree that became Cedar Woman? What was her prayer and her vision that was so strong, that has made us as Coast Salish women so resilient through everything, through all the atrocities that my community continues to face today? What makes us so strong? And it's that love. It's that love and that prayer that comes from our ancestors. And so when I'm there, I'm listening for that call, and I'm answering that.
And adding to the rings.
And that's another way in. So, yes, it's been a very tricky journey to come back into the room after the last 3 months, and particularly after a very tragic moment in my life this last month and a half. And so my way in was through that eye, what's in there. And so to go back to what you're talking about that pushing away, for me, what I was exploring was what's inside of her prayer. And one of the things that's inside of her prayer is resilience. I love you, daughter. I love you, granddaughter. I love you. This is why I'm defending these Coast Salish lands and waters. This is why I'm standing at the front lines to say, no way, we don't want this pipeline. No way, we don't want our daughters and our mothers and our sisters and our two-spirited relatives to be taken and stolen anymore. And it's because of that resilience that she prayed for us and sends us every day.
I think there's something really powerful in I think we can finish there, because I think that's such a great way to think about how we deal with COVID as well, with this kind of idea of resilience and love and, you know, perseverance through and digging deep and doing it not alone, to know that we're not alone, whatever that means for each of us. So thank you so much for that, Tasha. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for watching.